Okay, I want you to please welcome back Ningwakwe.
Okay,
We're good.
I'm just going to read the question, or paraphrase the question, because some of this terminology here, I'm thinking in my Aboriginal mind, if I'm struggling with this, how many of you out there are going to be struggling with this? So I will just ask the question. Yeah, I was a teacher for a long time. So then the two of you can just sort of decide who's going to answer first, who's going to answer second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
The first theme that came out was how do we move forward? And the questions that came out of that are what can non-Aboriginals do? How can broken trust be healed? Are there any exemplar models where Aboriginals and non-Aboriginals are working well together?
Well is the operative word, right? I sometimes work with Ojibways. Last night I did a show with an Ojibwe. He was the producer. And I always find it difficult. And I'll tell you, I come from a very highly structured society. Does that sound familiar to you? So you and I probably work well together. More than when I'm working with Cree people or Ojibwe people. And the thing is that there's a lot of trust in coming from Ojibwe people toward you. They trust that you know what to do. They trust that you will do it. They trust that you'll do it on time. They'll trust that you'll get to where you're supposed to be. They'll trust that you'll arrive when you're supposed to arrive with the bare minimum of instructions. So it was, I had to go to the ROM at 6 o'clock, enter by the back. That was it. The ROM is huge.
You get lost in the ROM.
It's
I get
huge.
lost every time.
I know. It's like, there I am. Where's the back? First of all. And then, so I email, where's the back? Where the school buses enter. The school buses drive into the ROM? Must be a big doorway. Well, it turns out it's the side. And then he says, that's your chair. Okay. Gives me a schedule. I had to get myself up there. And apparently someone was supposed to get me up there, but he wasn't there. So I get myself up there because I know I have to perform at, 8:20. The thing is that it wouldn't do me any good to say, I like things all written down in neat, orderly things, like a stage manager, all these notations, directions, maps, all of this stuff. I'm from the West. We don't do very good maps. I don't know if you know that all the original maps in this country were done by Aboriginal people, not by the settlers, the explorers. They didn't draw any maps. It was all done by you guys. But on the West Coast, the maps look like this. Go out to the ocean, go down, see water coming in the ocean, go up. So it all looks like a little loop. And of course, the coastline looks like this. Well, we don't draw that. Just do. You're there. But at the same time, we're very meticulous. In our ceremony, we actually have someone we call the speaker, but really they're the stage manager. And they have everything timed down to the second. And everything's organized, and he's with him, and he's with her, and so on. And so the two systems don't mesh easily. But the person with the more rigid system has to untighten the sphincters a little bit. because it doesn't work the other way. Ojibways will not tighten up. I've been here 20 years. Eventually, you learn to laugh at yourself, I think. So that's the difficulty of working with another culture. There's always a difficulty. What to do? What do you like to do? And then do that. If you're an artist, like a singer, my love for Pauline Johnson is immense because she wrote down the stories my great-great-grandmother, the Princess of Peace, told her, and my great-great-grandfather, Capilano, the first person to go to England and try and get redress for us in 1905, and the founder of the first modern Native organization on this continent. Yeah? So I have great love for her, and she's buried in one of our villages, Chetus. And the Queen just recently snatched that out from under our feet. The lease was up, and she declared it Canada. And there's nothing we can do about that, except maybe sue her. I don't know how that works, but so things happen. But thank you for that. Pauline Johnson is actually, she's British and of Haudenosaunee or Mohawk descent because they marked their citizens through the female line, and her mother was British. But yeah, she's of Mohawk descent, they say, because they like her too. The Mohawks like her.
I mean, I guess add that the reason why getting Indigenous ideas and philosophies into the education is if you don't do that, then, there's this, to simplify it, linear European approach.
Dominates.
And it simply either goes banging through or completely misses what the conversation is. I mean, if you look at the treaty negotiations, which is, the Supreme Court has been very smart because it actually has stretched its mind the idea that there are different ways of making arguments. Mm-hmm. But the treaty negotiations, after the first period where I think people were of goodwill and people actually, the newcomers tried to learn and to understand because they had to in a way. But later on, you basically had these things where some official said, well, here's the treaty and read it, and here's the money and sign it, and that was it. And then, a chief would stand up and speak for 3 hours. Mm-hmm. And they'd say, why is it going on so long? Because, of course, they didn't understand that it was a different way of making an argument. It was that the argument was about contextualizing.
Yes.
And the other was about buying and selling property. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting is that the Supreme Court made the big effort and understood that it wasn't about buying and selling property, essentially. Yeah. It was about contextualizing. Yeah. And so that's why you have to read some of the philosophy. You have to know the history. You have to understand how it works. I remember the first time I saw, in fact, it was the head of the Anglican Church stand up and give a blessing in the direction of the four winds. And I thought, what's happening? And then, of course, it was explained to me, and I understood. You don't have to just face in one direction. Yeah. You can face in four directions. See, it's completely different. So you just have to, and there are lots of people who are doing that. There are lots of people who are working together and have, from the very beginning, have been working together. The problem is the power structure has asserted one way of thinking, and that's in a way the problem. But there's a long list of people working.
You have to be very, very fluid. I was in a ceremony, and we're pretty stiff about our ceremonies. I guess everybody is, but there was a ceremony of healing going on with the Ojibwe women, and when that happens with Salish people, we sing so that we don't swallow the illness that's being let go. So I said, okay, everybody make 2 lines. This was up in Birch Island, right? Next thing you know, it's a circle. Okay. My cousin across from me just says, sing. So I sang, I'm not at home. Longhouse and a teepee, you have to be very flexible. And you have to know that your ways have dominated for a long time. So step back. We're in Ojibwe territory. Step back. I know I have to step back. I'm a guest like you here. Like any other, I'm a guest like you. We're both guests in Ojibwe territory. And so we're trying to learn the Anishinaabe way. And I have learned one thing quite thoroughly. It took me a long time, only 20 years. But it was take only what you need. And I've really learned that very thoroughly, I think.
I give you, then we go to the next question maybe, but I give you one, but there were two moments when I realized I didn't know anything, which was a good start, and one I was 29, so it's late, and the other I was about 34, even later.
Yeah.
But the one when I was about 34, I was president of PEN Canada. I guess it was the time Mulroney was prime minister, and they cut the funding to Aboriginal publications. So we decided it was the first, I knew enough to know that we had to act, and it was the first initiative I think that PEN had done with Indigenous people. So we basically went to Ottawa, we complained, etc. Anyway, it was arranged that I would meet with a group of First Nations leaders in a hotel in Toronto, and I was a very busy young man, and knew a lot of things, and and I arrived, let's say I arrived at 5 o'clock, and there was a couple of elders and some younger women and some middle-aged men, and I didn't quite understand who was who. And I said, listen, thank you so much. We're really thrilled we're able to support you. You just tell me what you want us to do. Unfortunately, I've got a meeting in an hour, but so do you think we could get this in an hour? And I felt a kind of coldness in the room.
Yeah, the room chilled right there.
The room chilled.
This
and
is
then
the
silence. And then one of the young women said, Mr. Saul, it's really kind of you to come. And it's just we hadn't quite finished. And there's something we have to say to the elders. Would you mind just leaving the room for a moment? So I said, sure. So, I went outside. Exactly 1 hour later, they opened the door and asked me in. By that time, I'd worked it out. And I came in and I said, I get it. I apologize. I've canceled all my appointments. Tell me just whatever. And then we all laughed our heads off.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what Lee's saying. Just back off.
Back down.
Listen.
Sit down.
Learn. You'll make mistakes. Apologize. Get on with it.
Thank you. You actually,
Yeah.
First I got mad. Then I started laughing.
you actually segued into the part of the question that I left out, because as I explained to these two fine people who condensed the questions, I'll just start with a couple of them and they might answer. The next one in what you were saying, and that's, what do non-Aboriginal people say to other non-Aboriginals to help them get it? And you gave a good example. Can you add anything else?
No, just face yourself. I think people learn less if you explain things to them than if you give a story about yourself. I have a long litany of errors in working with other Aboriginal people. You can just no end to them that other people can benefit from. And I'm sure he has a long litany. So I think that's the best way to go about it. If you're teaching, use yourself as a negative example. And the ones that work best are the ones that you're able to get through with good humor. That you need to be able to really laugh at yourself. Because the most democratic people in the world are the Anishinaabe. And in terms of Turtle Islanders, I'm a Turtle Islander, we're the least democratic on the West Coast. We're the slavers, the people that went raiding each other kind of chronically and beating the crap out of each other. That's what we did. Some of our boys are still kind of doing it. We organize it so that it's safe. But, we're fairly hierarchical people. we struggle with it today. And you're fairly hierarchical. So we'd probably get along.
Well, you sort of touched on something that Michael and I spoke about earlier this week, and it's kind of a circular thought that I'm giving you here, but I'm Anishinaabe, so forgive me. The Anishinaabe don't have to forgive me, they know. When I was thinking about this event and I was reading your book and it gave me much food for thought, I realized, we're all here with our own special gifts, and we need to step into those gifts and use them in the best way possible. So if we have different ways of coming at things, then we need to recognize that's their gift and this is my gift. So recognizing and respecting people's differences and trying to embrace them, I think, is also a very good idea. The other thought that I shared with you after reading your book was that it's great. I love that you pointed out all these beautiful examples of what people have done across the country to be heard and to help move this agenda forward of our coming back. Is that, yes, the focus is on academics and lawyers and people with letters after their names and in very high professional positions, but we've got people in this room who are part of the comeback each and every day of their lives. You're touching someone's life. You're helping them to stay true to themselves, to believe in themselves, and to move forward. So I want to thank all of you for that. Okay, so the next theme that emerged is on education. How do we as boy, we'll get some good ideas out of this, won't we, Tina? How do we as educators work with angry Aboriginal youth? And the sub-question to that, what changes need to be made to the education system?
Yeah, I don't know the youth that you're speaking of, so I don't know that they're angry. I doubt it. I think there's an amazing amount of hurt that's in our community, and when a human being gets hurt, the adrenals are touched off, and that floods you with hormones, and that expresses itself as anger. That's how the body works. So I don't ever deal with any person, whatever color they are, their anger. I get them to express their hurt, because that's the seed of it. Or their fear. That's another seed of it. Your students have very likely, if they go to school in this province, been racist toward ours. And that remedy is to, first of all, alleviate the hurt of the person that you're facing. And not to accept the mask they're wearing. The anger hides the hurt. He's a young man, and he wants to be able to take it like a man. And you can't. You can't take the absence of acceptance and racism from this country toward us. You can't just take it. I know. I went to these schools. My kids went to these schools. My grandkids go to these schools today. So teachers have to get involved in that. And lots of teachers are reluctant. But there, on the positive side, there's lots of people who do workshops to show you how to deal with hurt children, the wounded child. There's lots of different ways to deal with children in that way. And I've done it lots. I've worked with wounded kids. I have a daughter who's kind of an expert in it. In Winnipeg, she works with North End wounded children, 600 at a time, and moves them from gangsterism to citizenship. It's possible if you deal with the hurt.
And isn't there, sort of following on from what you said, there's the people who have been hurt or being hurt, one of the ways of dealing with is they also have values. Mm-hmm. There are things to be admired about them. their dignity is
Yeah.
important. And so does our education system have the capacity to do that?
Yeah.
And I mean, I could give you two, small, examples. I mean, one is a couple of years ago, the then Treaty Commissioner in Saskatchewan started something, which was that, I can't remember if it was every morning, let's say it was every morning, kids in literally kindergarten and grade 1 would be brought in, sort of, let's say 50% Aboriginal, 50% non-Aboriginal, and they'd spend the morning together, a couple of hours together, learning Cree songs in Cree and singing them together. So it was really small kids, their imagination is being shaped. And it's being shaped not by singing English songs, but by singing Cree songs that they would share. So you move the dignity to where it belongs, in a sense. I guess another example of that would be, say, the way education is done, largely shaped by Alberta in the Arctic, which is, it's great there are schools at all the villages in the Arctic, but most of these schools are following a curriculum which doesn't have anything to do with the Arctic.
Yeah, no,
And it's all about, well, they need an education so they can compete. We say, okay, now, are you educated? You say, wait a minute, is the purpose of the education to make them leave the Arctic?
yeah.
Because what is the purpose of this education? Because if you look at the education, it's an education designed for somebody who's going to work in an office building.
Yeah.
So, and there's room for maybe 5 to 8 jobs in the village working in offices, right? Probably in the town council and maybe in the co-op store.
Yeah.
So then you say, well, every community in the Arctic is isolated in the sense that it doesn't have a road. If you live in that village and you're going to stay in that village, what's the meaning of life there? Well, one of the big meanings of life is going out on the land and hunting. Right? Well, that's not something that somebody who works in a skyscraper in Toronto does that much. It's not a normal part of their life. It's not built into the education system. So I've actually heard, not in the Arctic, but say in the Yukon, teachers say, well, our biggest problem is that, moose hunting is in September and school starts in September. They got to choose. Why do they have to choose?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you restructure the education so it includes going out in the land? Why don't the teachers go out on the land with them? Well, I don't understand what this choice is, right? And so what we're doing is we're actually creating education systems which are designed for people who are going to go and live in cities. And we're saying that if you don't do that, you're not civilized, you're not educated, it's not culture. What are we saying? It's nonsense. So you actually have to say, what is the appropriate education system for the place?
Yeah.
And once you do that, then you start seeing where the dignity lies, where the logic lies. For example, in the Arctic, you'll find that one of the most popular southern structures is the junior rangers or air cadets or whatever, and they're filled with the young women. Why? Because traditionally the young women didn't go out hunting. They did the other stuff, but the other stuff they don't sort of do that much anymore, but now they're learning to hunt. They're learning to hunt in the junior rangers. But the education system prevents them from going out on the land, except during the holidays, which is the wrong time. So it's about rethinking, you can't respect the culture and have an education system which doesn't take it into account.
My aunt was a teacher. And she spoke 7 languages. She had to learn 7 languages, she felt. She learned the languages, the people she was teaching, instead of always teaching in English. Now, I don't know too many people that would do that.
No.
But that's what she did. Ukrainian, Cree, Achif, French, English, Chippewan, and Dinedeh, Northern Alberta. And she was revered when she passed away. At her retirement, she passed away from a bus accident. But she was a Métis woman whose mother spoke many languages too. We are very narrow about what education is. We don't think we have to learn about the people we're teaching. That's a big mistake. Big mistake.
Thank you. I was just looking around the room because I know there are several educators in the room who were listening as you gave that very eloquent answer, and I know that every day We're trying to make those kinds of differences with the students that we work with, and the funders don't quite get it. But we still keep plugging away, don't we? Yeah, see people nodding at me. The next,
And sorry, just the other thing is things like, very simple things like introducing Indigenous languages into all the schools where there is any Indigenous population.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it in a number of the schools. It doesn't mean that only the Indigenous kids are going to go into the Cree classes. I mean, I've been in schools and you go in and you see the natural outcome of people moving beyond grade 8, beyond 13 and 14, which is to say you want to be in the class where your girlfriend is, or your boyfriend is, and if she or he is doing Cree, you want to do Cree.
Yeah.
Right? You have to offer this possibility to the kids, and we'll see who wants to learn Cree. You might be surprised about who wants to learn Cree. If you don't offer it, or if you offer it as this is for the Indian kids, right?
Yeah.
That's not the thing. You offer it. You offer this stuff, and I think you'd be very pleasantly surprised by what happens. For one thing, if you can speak a language your parents can't speak,
Right.
it's really great. You know, one of the big discoveries.
It's code now.
One of the big things of French immersion, one of the things kids love about French immersion, if their parents can't speak French.
Yeah.
Anyway.
thank you. Okay, this is going to be a pretty good answer coming from two authors. Is the current media movie industry a distraction and distortion of history and issues? Oh, somebody likes that question.
But there are some good, CBC, or NBC has produced some good television stuff on
I think what
on
happens
Indigenous.
is this, that we let the television be a babysitter and we let the child determine how he's going to be educated by it. I think that's the problem. We stop parenting them when they're, I don't know, about 6 or 7, and stopped guiding what they watch. I was going up to Winnipeg with my daughter. She was studying the Gododin, which is Irish ancient oratory. She was studying oratory from all over the world. So a lot of it, she reads it to me, right? Because that's what we like to do. We read to each other. So I'm listening to her read all this Irish poetry, a lot of rocks in it. And I noticed that Ojibways live around a lot of rocks. And they're always talking about rocks. And so I find this kind of interesting, the business of the Irish and the Ojibwe. But anyway, we're going along. We see this little guy sitting on he's made of rocks. And I said, oh, look, Tanya, there's some of your Irish peeps. And my 8-year-old granddaughter says, Grandma, first of all, they are Inuit, and they're called Inukshuks. I obviously don't know anything about Inuit and Inukshuk. So she watches Discovery Channel. And I said, how do you find this out? She says, you should watch Discovery once in a while. You know, kids can be intelligent too, you know. I think we have to guide our children's, television watching. At 2 years old, she knew what a meerkat was. What's a meerkat? Anyway, all these things that I learned from my granddaughter, even about my own Indigenous people. I didn't know anything about Inuit people. I do now, because we have Inuit language and Inuit teachers at University of Toronto and courses and so on, and so I make it my business to learn. But at that time, I wasn't teaching any Indigenous courses, so saw no need, and you don't think there's going to be an Inuit around every corner. Aren't they in the Arctic? I kind of have to deal with them, you get pretty blinded. So we have to take the glasses off and have a look around at this country and who's here. I think that would help. Yeah, that would help the television problem. Watch good movies.
Thank you. Mr. Saul has nothing to add to that. You spoke so eloquently.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a hot topic, government election. Is there a leader capable of carrying this forward? how do we make the right election result happen?
I think we don't know. We don't know, and therefore, I mean, that's where we have to be asking. I mean, it's not just asking the leader of the party. You have to be asking your local candidates. You have to use every opportunity you have with anybody who's elected or wants to be elected to say, well, what exactly is your position on this issue? What is your position? What do you know? And what will you do? And is it part of your official party platform? So that we can judge you on it if you are elected. You know? I mean, you really have to decide that when you have that 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes with somebody who has or might have power, what are you going to use it for? And when I say this is the number one issue, use it for that. Cross-examine them and demand that they tell you what they would do and where it is on their list. Is it they're thinking about it? Is it number 22? Is it number 10? Is it number 8? Is it number 1? And if it's number 1, what are they going to do? And in what period of time are they going to do it? And which things are they going to do? I mean, you have to do your job as a citizen. Give them a really, really hard time.
I think that's the key. Do your job as a citizen. No, there is no current leader of any party that's capable of leading this, but there is a current person that's capable of leading this. So let's form a special parliamentary committee, get Justice Sinclair to implement the recommendations. And let's elect people who agree with that. So we got to organize ourselves, and we got to get on the internet. We got to get our grandkids to show us how, if we don't know how. We got to start, pooling together our resources all over the country, that this is the number one election issue. This is a Canadian problem. We need a special parliamentary committee to implement the changes, and let's ask Justice Murray to do that, because he did a pretty good job finding out what the problems were.
Yeah. And I think there's one other thing, and this is it's a problem. It's not a problem. It's a question, and I don't have the right to have the answer. Yeah. For a long period of time, particularly First Nations, I would say more than Métis and Inuit, but particularly First Nations, felt that they didn't want to go into parliament or legislatures. They had their own business to do. The treaties to negotiate. You take someone like the elected head of the Nishka for 25 years. His whole active life was spent fighting the Canadian people and the federal government to get a deal that could have been signed in about 12 months. And we used every penny we had and every lawyer we had. So the result is that we've gone through the last 50 years, let's say, with Aboriginal leaders saying, I have a lot of work to do at home. I have a lot of work to do in the Aboriginal community. I'm not even sure I believe in Parliament in the power of Parliament. Why should I want to be there? And I completely understand that from the point of view of where we were. Now we're in a slightly different position, and there's no question that in this election it seems like there are going to be a lot more Aboriginal candidates than there ever been in history, as far as I can tell. And actually, the political parties, at least 2 of them, are actively seeking Aboriginal candidates and actually seeking them not just to run, but for some ridings that could be won. Right? I mean, I think the Liberals already have 12 or something candidates. No. I don't know how many the NDP have got. No. And there's some really interesting Aboriginals running this time. And I would guess there are going to be more. I would think more will come in the next little while. There are still a lot of young who say, under no circumstances would I run, I reject totally. But there is, the one question I raise is this. It's a question of power. These things, it's really following on from what you said, Lee, which is the way in which you put things in place is by taking power. You get power by winning election. You can't do it on your own. Like one really smart First Nation woman can't carry the House of Commons. 5 to 10 is a completely different story. That's what happened with women's issues. Once you got a certain percentage of women in the House,
They all take that shoe off like Sheila Cox.
Yeah.
Bang, bang.
and suddenly you have a critical mass, and suddenly the debate changes. And so I think that's a big question for Indigenous people. It's partly being answered, and we'll see after this next election. It's not just who's in the government, but how many Aboriginals will there be in the House, and will it be enough to change the debate? And are people really willing to ruin their lives by going and sitting in that place for 5 or 6 years? Because that's what politics does to you. It's a really tough business. It's bad for your family, it's bad for your health, it's bad for everything. But that's the way you change the laws. That's the way you get tax money moved over to education. That's how you do it. You take power and you make it happen.
Actually, it turns out it may not be a money issue. Did you read the paper that $1 billion was transferred to us and not spent?
It was in the Department of
Give it to me.
Indian
I
Affairs.
could go shopping with that.
But then that's also, you see, where was the minister? Right?
I don't know.
Where was the minister?
We don't elect our minister. I think that's a big problem. You elect him. Yeah.
Thank you. I noted that when I was doing the research to prepare for this event, that Ovid Mercredi is now aligned with the NDP in Manitoba.
AOV, my old friend.
Yeah, he's become the president of the party.
Yep.
Until, become the president of the party.
Last time he talked to me, he said he had things for me to do in Winnipeg, so maybe that's what he's talking about.
Last question, and it's to do with the environment, and we know about that very well, don't we?
Can I just, before you ask that question, somebody asked me before we started a question, which doesn't seem to have made it in, and I thought it was a really good question, because with the delivery of this report, the legal obligation of the churches to do certain things comes to an end, if I understand correctly.
No.
Well, that's what I've been
No. There's recommendations.
No, but the actual obligation, I think.
This is in lieu of a court case. This is a thing you all got. This is not over by any means. The court case can be put back on the table if the litigants aren't happy.
Right. Okay. All right.
So there's a lot of responsibility that goes with this, and there's going to be maybe another court case, to deal with what happens to the recommendations.
So, but the point I wanted to make, which doesn't contradict that, is that whatever has happened over the last X years, and whatever money has been paid, and whatever agreement was made, for us to believe that the churches were serious,
Yeah.
it begins now. In other words, the previous period was about negotiation and admission and apology.
I see what you're getting at.
A formal thing.
I see what
And so
you're
now
getting
that formal thing is over for the churches. Now, the pure ethical obligation begins.
Well, they also had the obligation of setting up healing funds and that sort of thing. And they're still continuing to do that. There doesn't seem to be any stop to that. And none of the churches want to stop that until the litigants are happy.
But I think I guess what I'm saying is it goes beyond the question of litigants. Now it's a moment when, if you're a church,
Oh, yeah.
what do you stand for?
Yeah.
It's not about your obligation.
Yeah. It's about your ethic.
It's about your ethic. And if you are indeed an ethical leader in the community, now your real work begins to prove that you want the community to move in the right direction.
Yeah.
I think that's the point.
Yeah. And that's parishioners, right? The parishioners are in charge of that, really. You are in charge of that
Yeah,
as
it comes
well.
back to the parishioners.
Yeah.
But also the leadership, also the priests and the ministers, and it's the whole organization.
Everybody can be put the squeeze on,
You sort of got into this next question, and in my mind it's related, might not be related in yours. Can the environmental issue be used as a way of leveraging more involvement in the Aboriginal issue?
I wouldn't put it that way.
No.
Okay, let's hear how you'd put it.
Well, I mean, I don't know, Ali. I mean, it seems to me that
I think the environmental issue is a global issue, really. We need to get it out there. You know, we need to do global things about the environment, and we need to do personal things about the environment. And I think that for Aboriginal people, we have a special responsibility toward the environment. And what we need to do is get ourselves to rise to those special responsibilities. I don't know that it has anything to do with residential school at this point, unless you consider cultural reclamation as part of that, you know, restoring our belief systems about the environment and all that. But it's not directly tied together, in my mind anyway.
I guess where I would...
Somebody else from the audience, Snubby.
I mean, I think this is where, you know, I was saying earlier that we need to be rethinking the philosophies that we're using in our education. And so if you read, you know, Richard Attlee or a whole list of Indigenous philosophers, Jim Dumont, I mean, there's a whole pile of them, in Lethbridge, Leroy Little Bear. You read any of them, and they explain very clearly. I mean, hundreds of people do this. You explain very clearly that there's an approach towards the role of human beings in the world, which is completely different from the European Western approach, because the European Western approach is a philosophy which puts us at the top and in charge, and that the earth is there to serve us. And that's why we don't actually have built-in brakes on ourselves. We can't break ourselves when we're dealing with the environment, because we're the people who are there to be served. That is the nature of Western philosophy, and therefore of Western power and politics. So even though we know that we should stop, you know, using water or turning on the lights or polluting, underneath all of that, there's a Platonist philosophy which basically says, hey, we're the big guys. This is for us. And that's how you end up with sort of economic philosophies that say, no, we have to keep growing, we have to do this, we have to do that. And I actually think that there are Indigenous philosophies, Tsawak out of the Cree, Tsawak, Wetaskiwin out of the Cree, Tsawak out of the Hausit, to take these two examples, which actually explain how the human being has a different role, and it's within the whole, not on top of the whole.
Okay.
And that gives one the ability that gives us the ability to stop ourselves because we're part of
The
whole.
question is, though, how is this connected to the reconciliation?
No, it's not.
So that's your answer. No, it's not.
No, it's not good.
We're moving on now.
But it is. But I thought the question was, is it connected? How do you connect the Indigenous issues and environmental issues? You don't do it cynically.
No.
I think you say what we're lacking
Yeah.
is a philosophy which allows us to deal with the environment in a way which is natural. And is
Okay, I got a real simple answer. When you move to
natural
another
to us,
country,
I mean, not natural in the natural to us.
when you move to another country, you adopt the philosophy of that country. This is another country. You've moved from somewhere else. Here's the philosophy. First, take only what you need. Second, take care of the land. That's the philosophy. That's it.
And you know, I just remember being in a motorboat with the chief of Brochet, Manitoba. We're up there with Thompson Highway. That's where he comes from. And at the end of the day, we went out fishing with him, and there were a lot of pike, northern pike, and we got the first one and killed it, and then I pulled in another one, and I was keeping it, and the chief said, "Well, why are you keeping it?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, you've got dinner.
What do you need?
Why are you keeping the second one?" And I said, "Oh." Then I put it back. Now, that was some years ago, and now people have sort of learned that.
Yeah.
They've learned that. I'm leaving here to go up to our little tiny island further up Georgian Bay. Everybody in Georgian Bay knows you put it back,
You put
right?
it back.
But we haven't taken that philosophy, which is essentially an Indigenous philosophy of we're part of the whole, and one of the outcomes of being part of the whole is you take what you need, not more.
Yeah, not more.
And if there isn't enough, you figure out another way to do it. But we haven't taken that philosophy and applied it to the larger scene. And I think if we could change the philosophies that we teach ourselves,
And our children and grandchildren.
that's what you mean, then I think we would find it far easier to know how to stop ourselves.
Yeah.
I didn't do that very well, but anyway.
I got it, and I'm sure a lot of other people in the room here got it. So
Thank you
I want
very
to
much.
say that this has been a fabulous way of spending a Saturday afternoon with the sun shining out there.
That's the end.
Going to get Michael and Ronette to come back up.
Sure. Well, it's probably about time we thank the committee, huh? This has been a wonderful afternoon. The audience has thinned a bit here, and I'm glad that you guys have stuck it out because it's such a rare opportunity that we get to hear from two elders, one of my culture and one of the Indigenous culture here in Canada. Now, I've been really, really slow to thank the people that helped put this together, and I've got to thank Renee Abram, who's the executive director of Mawikwadong, who invited me to help organize this committee with her, and thanks so much, Renee, for hanging in there and being Renee. And of course, Ronette, also known as Seven, also known as Ronnie, just an unbelievable woman to work with here. And Rebecca, our brave leader of the Wasa-Nabin committee or program in Mawikwadong, who will take all of the money that you have donated so far. And, there is still a chance. There are still donation jars out there. And this has been very moving. And I am not joking. Empty your wallets before you go home. It's Sunday tomorrow. This is Owen Sound. You can't spend the money. And put it in so that we can help inner city Aboriginal youth. Thank you for that, please. Also, unbelievably, very believably, the most difficult job, the worst job on any committee for something like this is fundraising. And we are here because of the efforts of the incredibly wonderful David McLaren here. David, who wrote the paper that got us the money. And David, these committees do not work without you. That you're invaluable. Marianne Wilhelm, my very good friend on so many peace and justice committees. Ann Schneider, where's Ann Schneider? Ann Schneider over here who helped compile the questions. And these 6 people were so wonderful and worked so hard for the last 7 months to bring this program for you. Thank you. And please, we did this for free.
No, there were 7.
Oh, 7.
You,
Hi.
David, you were on the committee.
Well, thank you very much. Yes. Well, thank you for that, Ronnie. You're just so wonderful. I have to thank the funders. We can't thank them enough. Even though David wrote all the stuff that got you to part with your money, unless you came to the table, we would not be here. Thanks to the Harmony Center for providing such an incredible spot. And they too have donation boxes out here. We should support this. What community do you know of that has a place like this to meet like this? It's a wonderful thing. And one last thing. If you want change, and this I say to my First Nations brothers and sisters, join us and let's vote for change. Let's get some people in Ottawa that will implement the report on truth and reconciliation. Thank you so much. And Miigwech. Did you want to say anything else? No. We're all good? present these. You can bring them in.